Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something critical, something a lot of us maybe don't want to think about, but absolutely need to. We're looking at those key levers, those specific actions that can determine whether you, well, kind of slide into a pretty rapid decline after 50, or if you actually thrive.
Exactly. It's about seizing control, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a control that, according to performance expert Mike Boyle, many people realize they need far too late.
Mm.
He paints this stark picture um, of a really significant physical drop-off that tends to happen between, say, 50 and 65.
Yeah, that's the window he
And
highlighted.
it happens mostly because people just didn't take those preemptive steps, maybe years or even decades before. It's a bit of a wake-up call.
It really is. So our mission here in this deep dive is to weave together the best strategies from some top minds. You've given us this incredible stack of sources, folks like Mike Boyle, Jeff Cavaliere on the movement side. Then you've got Dr. Diana Hill, Maya Raichura looking at the mind.
And the internal biochemistry, too, right? With Dr. Layne Norton on metabolism and Dr. Natalie Crawford on hormones. It's a really holistic picture we're trying to build.
Absolutely. We're pulling out the core strategies, physical, mental, metabolic, all interconnected, to give you, our listener, a real shortcut to being, fundamentally clued in on building health that lasts.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is seeing how they connect, how putting in that physical effort actually bolsters your mental game, and how both are needed for, optimal metabolic function. You can't really pull one lever in isolation.
Right. And just to ground this, let's talk about Mike Boyle for a second. This isn't just theory for him. We're talking about someone with serious runs on the board. He was involved way back in the 80s in helping shape training for the NFL Combine.
Yeah, like inventing some of that stuff.
Exactly. And he spent years with the Boston Bruins, won a World Series ring with the Red Sox. This is knowledge forged in the fire of elite performance, which makes his insights on longevity just, well, incredibly compelling.
So when Mike Boyle talks about that looming decline, a big part of it starts with what he calls the apathy problem. The statistic he cites is just
Yeah.
staggering. 70% of the entire population just doesn't get enough exercise.
70%. Wow. And that's just general exercise, right? If you narrow it down to resistance training, the stuff that actually builds or maintains muscle and bone.
The numbers are way, way lower. Probably under 30%, maybe even less. It's shocking, really. People just aren't doing the foundational work needed to stay strong.
Okay, so why? Why this huge gap? Mike Boyle points to people just kind of giving up on movement, but Dr. Gabrielle Leon brings up another, maybe more uncomfortable point. It's this visceral, almost physical aversion some people have to the feeling of exertion.
Yeah, Dr. Leo mentions she can empathize with patients struggling with diet because that's tangled up with social stuff, emotions, all that. But she finds it harder when someone genuinely says, I just don't like lifting weights, it hurts.
That's a tough one. Is it because they started too late? Maybe things already ache? Or is it something deeper?
Dr. Gabrielle Leon actually wonders if it might be, for some people, almost like genetic hardwiring. Just like some people are wired to crave sweets. Maybe others are just less inclined to seek out that kind of physical stress, the kind that actually forces adaptation.
Interesting.
She even uses herself as an example with running. She knows she needs cardio for her heart health, but she admits she gets absolutely zero enjoyment from that feeling of gasping for air. For her, it's pure compliance, not pleasure.
That distinction is huge, doing it because you have to versus finding some actual, internal drive for it. But whether it's wiring or just bad habits, the experts like Boyle and Cavaliere agree. If you want to train for the long haul, you need to rethink some of the old gym dogma.
Definitely. Especially the absolute insistence on heavy barbell back squats and deadlifts as the be-all and end-all.
Right. Jeff Cavaliere and Mike Boyle both talk about how the risk-reward calculation just changes as you get older, say past 40 or 50.
Yeah, Cavaliere points out that the constant heavy axial loading, that compressive force down your spine from a heavy barbell, starts to really increase the risk of chronic damage, disc issues, joint wear and tear.
And does the potential benefit for just general health and longevity still outweigh that mounting risk? They argue increasingly, maybe not.
Mike Boyle has this fantastic analogy that makes it so clear. The car door analogy.
Oh, yeah. Tell us that one.
He asks you to imagine, right, if every time you slammed your car door shut, there was a 1 in 8 chance it would genuinely hurt you. because you pain,
Okay.
would you keep slamming it?
Yeah.
Or would you maybe find a gentler way to close the door?
You definitely stop slamming it. 8th time, 1st time, doesn't matter.
Exactly. But people keep grinding away at these high-risk, high-load lifts, maybe because they think they have to, or they like the feeling of lifting heavy, even when their body is sending signals saying, hey, maybe ease up here.
So that realization led Mike Boyle down a different path.
A huge pivot, really. He became a massive proponent of single leg training, unilateral work, because he saw and then proved with data that you could get just as strong, functionally strong, using one leg at a time, but without hammering the spine and joints nearly as much.
How does that work? Why is single leg safer but still effective?
Well, think about a heavy back squat.
Hmm.
Often, what gives out first isn't your leg muscles, your quads or glutes. It's your core's ability to stabilize that huge weight, or your spine's tolerance for the compression. The legs could maybe handle more, but the torso becomes the weak link.
Ah, I see. The spine limits the muscle stimulus.
Precisely. So Mike Boyle tested this back around 2006 with his hockey players, elite athletes. They found that basically every single athlete who could do a rear foot elevated split squat, a single leg movement with 300 pounds,
Okay.
could also front squat a bilateral movement, but generally less spinal load than a back squat 300 pounds.
Wow. So the single leg work built equivalent strength for that bilateral move, but likely with less spinal stress.
Exactly. It delivered the stimulus the legs needed for performance without that limiting, potentially damaging axial load. It was a game changer for how he trained athletes, prioritizing orthopedic health.
And this isn't just for elite athletes, right? This ties back to Dr. Gabrielle Leon's personal story, too.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Layne shared a really powerful personal example. She actually developed severe hip dysplasia. And she traces it back directly to believing that old dogma, you should squat. But she was doing it, in her words, in a much too narrow position for her specific hip structure.
So she was essentially grinding her hip joints down because she was forcing a movement pattern that just didn't fit her anatomy.
That's exactly it, repeatedly. And that painful realization forced her to completely abandon bilateral squats. Now, she only uses single-leg movements. It's not a choice based on trends. It's a necessity for her to avoid further injury and still train effectively for hypertrophy.
What a lesson. It underscores that you absolutely have to listen to your own body, your own structure, or even the best intentions can lead to breakdown.
It's a foundation that has to match the individual. And speaking of foundations, Mike Boyle extends this thinking right down to youth sports. He's actually very critical of early sport specialization.
Oh, really? That seems counterintuitive today, with kids specializing younger and younger.
He calls it, and this is a direct quote, the worst possible thing you can do for your kid. He argues that specialization treats athletic development like a sprint, when it should be viewed as a developmental marathon.
Okay, unpack that. Why is sampling better?
His experience, and research supports this, is that kids who try lots of different things, maybe lacrosse, hockey, baseball like his son, or judo and soccer like his daughter, develop a much broader athletic base. They build better coordination, resilience, different movement patterns, a more, as he puts it, robust chassis.
So, variety builds a better long-term athlete.
It tends to, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And his goal when training young kids, say 11 or 12 years old, isn't even about getting them measurably stronger right away. He says he could care less about their bench press number at that age.
So what is the goal then?
Making them good lifters. It's all about embedding perfect form, motor control, technique before adding significant load.
That resonates with what Jeff Cavaliere says, too, about building a foundation that won't crack later under pressure.
Exactly. You don't want them getting to college and having to spend freshman year fixing bad movement habits they learned when they were 12 because someone pushed them to lift heavy too soon. It's about playing the long game, whether you're 40 or you're 11. Prioritize smart movement.
Okay, so we've talked about the physical stress of training, but that aversion Dr. Leon mentioned, that feeling of discomfort, it connects really strongly to how we handle mental discomfort too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that brings us to the work of Dr. Diana Hill, who really digs into the psychological roadblocks that stop us from being consistent and putting in the effort, whether it's in the gym or in life.
What kind of roadblocks are we talking about?
Well, Dr. Hill makes a really useful distinction between two states that often lead to stagnation. First, there's burnout, which most of us know. That's usually linked to external factors, just too much work, not enough support. Maybe your work clashes with your values.
Right, feeling overwhelmed and depleted.
Exactly. But then there's bore-out, which is different. That's the feeling of being underutilized, disengaged, unchallenged. You're not burning out from too much. You're rusting out from too little meaningful engagement.
Ah, that's interesting. Both sound pretty paralyzing.
They are. But Dr. Diana Hill argues the root cause often lies in how we deal with our inner world. Specifically, our tendency to avoid discomfort, anxiety, fear, boredom, sadness, even the physical soreness from a workout.
And what happens when we try to dodge those feelings?
Two things, usually. First, the avoidance itself creates a new problem. Like, you avoid the anxiety of starting a big project by procrastinating.
Only to end up with the massive anxiety of a looming deadline you haven't met.
Yeah.
Been there.
We all have. And the second consequence, which is super relevant to our health goals, is that we start to grip too tightly. We get rigid. We cling to the idea that if we just find the perfect plan, the perfect diet, the magic bullet, then all the discomfort will just vanish.
And that gripping actually prevents progress.
It blocks growth, according to Dr. Hill.
Yeah.
It stops us from being flexible, from adapting, from developing that psychological resilience you need to navigate the ups and downs of any long-term effort.
That rigidity often shows up in the stories we tell ourselves, right? The limiting beliefs about what we can or can't do, which leads us perfectly into the incredible story of Maya Raichura.
Well, Maya Raichura's story is just remarkable. It's such a powerful illustration of using the mind to reshape reality. She was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and the doctors basically told her it was incurable.
Wow. That's devastating news.
And the physical consequences were brutal. Extreme weight loss, constant pain, bathroom emergencies, and eventually she lost the ability to even walk. She was confined to a hospital bed.
Unimaginable. She said it wasn't just the physical toll, but it stripped away her sense of self, her light and joy.
Completely. And in that state, realizing physical recovery felt impossible on its own, she turned inward. She started using visualization, mental rehearsal, with incredible discipline.
What was her first goal?
Just to walk down the hospital hallway. That was it. And she describes using what she calls process visualization. Closing her eyes, vividly imagining every single step, feeling the floor, rehearsing the muscle movements in her mind again and again.
So not just picturing the end result, but the actual doing of it.
Exactly. She
Yeah.
was essentially rebuilding those neural pathways through mental practice until her body could start to follow. And it worked. She regained strength and eventually walked out of the hospital. But she also used another technique, one that sounds almost sci-fi, creative visualization for pain management.
Okay, tell me about that. How did she manage the physical pain?
She learned from a cognitive behavioral specialist about influencing physical sensations through imagination. Her gut pain was intense, right, girl? So Maya Raichura would close her eyes, picture her colon, and then visualize the pain itself. She imagined it as hundreds of tiny, biting piranhas literally eating her insides.
Whoa. That sounds intense. Why visualize something so graphic?
Because she didn't stop there. After fully acknowledging and visualizing the pain as these piranhas counting them, seeing their colors, she would then visualize herself taking control. She'd imagine herself armed, and then systematically, deliberately,
Don't tell me.
she would shoot all the fish.
No way.
Yes, she wasn't ignoring the pain. She was facing it, symbolizing it, and then actively mentally dismantling it through this creative narrative. It shows how powerful imagery can be for modulating physical sensation.
That's incredible. So she developed a whole system around this.
She did. Maya Raichura talks about 5 main types of visualization. We mentioned outcome, seeing the goal achieved, and process rehearsing the steps. Then creative, like the piranha example, using symbols. There's also negative visualization.
Negative. That sounds counterproductive.
It's counterintuitive, yeah.
Yeah.
It involves either visualizing losing something you value, your health, maybe to appreciate it more, or visualizing potential setbacks and mentally rehearsing how you'll cope. It builds resilience. And finally, somatic visualization, which is about really feeling the desired state in your body, like feeling the strength in her legs.
It all seems to come back to accepting reality, whether it's pain or limitation, and then working with it mentally.
Exactly, which connects beautifully to Oliver Burkeman's work on accepting our own finitude.
Right, Berkman's whole 4,000 weeks idea, the realization that our time is incredibly limited.
Yeah. He stresses that we can only really do a handful of truly significant things in the time we have. And his point is that facing this limitation isn't depressing, it's actually liberating.
How so? Liberating.
Because it frees you from the impossible burden of trying to do everything. The pressure to optimize every second, achieve every possible goal. It's unsustainable. Accepting you can't do it all lets you focus on what truly matters.
This definitely makes you rethink traditional goal setting, doesn't it? Berkman is quite critical of goals.
He finds them problematic because they always live in the future. You're constantly deferring your sense of satisfaction or completion until you hit that target, a weight, a promotion, whatever. Your present life becomes just a means to a future end.
He uses that powerful example of Olympic athletes, right?
Yeah, the gold medalists, they achieve this monumental lifelong goal.
Right.
And then the next day, they often feel completely lost, empty, because their entire identity was wrapped up in achieving that future thing, and now it's past.
So what's the alternative, according to Oliver Berkman, if not future goals?
The alternative is to focus on identity. Decide who you want to be right now, today. Do you want to be a curious person, a compassionate person, someone who practices the piano regularly? And then Berkman says you simply act from that identity immediately. You embody that quality now. You don't force yourself to practice piano to reach a future goal of being good. You practice because you are the kind of person who practices piano today.
Ah, I get it. It shifts the motivation from extrinsic, the future goal, to intrinsic, this is who I am now.
Precisely. It aligns your actions with your desired self in the present moment, which feels much more authentic and less like a constant struggle towards something distant. You just are that person through your actions today.
That idea of acting from identity now is such a great bridge to our final section, because when we talk about metabolism, hormones, internal health, well, consistency and facing reality are absolutely key.
No question. And Dr. Layne Norton really hammers this home when it comes to weight loss. He constantly reminds people the basic principle, calories in versus calories out, CICO, is simple, scientifically straightforward. But people confuse simple with easy. And the actual execution, sticking to a calorie deficit day after day, week after week, dealing with hunger, social situations, psychological triggers, that is incredibly hard work.
So it requires real commitment, real accountability.
And it requires being coachable. Dr. Layne Norton shares a really vulnerable story about this from his own experience in therapy. He admits he spent the first 2 years basically just venting, complaining about his problems.
Using it as a release valve, but not really changing anything.
Exactly, until his therapist finally challenged him, asking point blank if he just wanted to keep venting or if he actually wanted to get better.
Oof, that's direct.
It forced him to confront his own role. He had to shift from being the person who complains to being the person who actively implements the hard changes, rigorous journaling, setting difficult boundaries. He had to become coachable.
That self-monitoring piece seems crucial to Layne Norton's whole approach, especially with diet.
It's fundamental. One of his go-to tactics when starting with a new client is just asking them to track everything they eat for 1 week, but, and this is key, without trying to change anything, just observe and record.
Okay, why do that? Just baseline data.
It is baseline data, but something fascinating often happens. Many clients actually lose weight during that first week, even though they weren't trying to.
Really? How?
Because the simple act of tracking brings awareness. Suddenly they see the invisible calories, the extra olive oil in the pan, the dressing on the healthy salad, the mindless handful of chips, the calories in drinks.
Stuff you just don't think about.
Exactly. Layne Norton says people remember their main meals, but they constantly forget the snacks, the nibbles, the extras, and those add up massively. He notes that people who successfully maintain weight loss long-term are rarely frequent snackers, likely because it's just too easy to lose track of those calories. Awareness forces change.
So tracking isn't just about numbers, it's about confronting reality, which connects to our internal reality too, like hormones. Dr. Natalie Crawford really emphasizes this.
Yeah, Dr. Crawford makes a powerful case that we should view fertility not just as about having babies, but as a vital sign of overall hormonal health and, by extension, longevity.
How so? What's the connection?
Her point is that the systems governing fertility are deeply intertwined with our broader endocrine and metabolic health. Understanding your hormonal status earlier, things like ovarian reserve, gives you, in her words, more opportunity and time to change the trajectory of your health. Knowledge is power.
She specifically talks about the AMH test, right? The one that estimates egg count. There seems to be some debate about when to test that.
There is. Some doctors hesitate to test AMH in younger women, worrying that a low result might cause unnecessary stress or anxiety.
Which is understandable, I guess.
But Dr. Natalie Crawford pushes back on that. Her perspective is fundamentally about empowerment. She argues that if a woman knew she had lower ovarian reserve, indicating maybe a shorter reproductive window, she might make very different life choices.
Like what kind of choices?
Maybe about career timing, or how seriously she approaches finding a partner, or when she decides to start trying for a family. Knowing the biological reality allows you to align your life plans accordingly, rather than potentially facing disappointment later because you didn't have the data.
It puts agency back in the woman's hands.
That's her core argument. Data empowers informed decisions. Another area Dr. Natalie Crawford is really concerned about is what she calls the birth control mask.
Okay, what's being masked?
Often it's underlying hormonal and metabolic conditions, especially polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS.
Right, and PCOS isn't just a reproductive issue, it's fundamentally metabolic, isn't it? Involving insulin resistance.
Exactly. Insulin resistance is often at the heart of it, leading the ovaries to produce excess androgens, like testosterone. This causes symptoms like irregular periods, acne, sometimes hair growth. The birth control pill can manage these symptoms quite well because it suppresses ovulation and regulates the hormonal cycle artificially.
So it looks like the problem is solved, but it's really just papering over the cracks.
Precisely. The pill acts like a Band-Aid. The underlying metabolic dysfunction, the insulin resistance, might still be there, potentially worsening silently. Then, when a woman decides to come off the pill, maybe to try and conceive,
All the original symptoms come roaring back.
right, the irregular cycles, the acne returns, and it often gets misdiagnosed as some vague post-birth control pill syndrome. But Dr. Crawford argues, no, it's often the PCOS that was there all along, just unmasked. The pill didn't cause it, it just hid it.
So if the pill is a mask, what are the real tools, the lifestyle levers Dr. Natalie Crawford recommends for managing hormonal health and tackling that root metabolic issue?
She highlights two that are incredibly powerful, though maybe not flashy. The first one is sleep.
Sleep. Okay, seems basic, but
It's profoundly important and chronically neglected. Dr. Crawford points out most adults get maybe 6 hours, often less. But biologically, we need closer to 7.5 or 8 hours for proper restoration.
what does sleep actually do for hormones?
It's crucial for clearing out inflammation, managing cortisol levels, our main stress hormone, and allowing the whole endocrine system to regulate properly. Chronic sleep deprivation is like imposing chronic stress on your body, which throws hormones out of whack.
Okay, so sleep is non-negotiable. What's the second lever?
The second one brings us right back to where we started with Mike Boyle and Jeff Cavaliere. Skeletal muscle. Building and maintaining muscle through resistance training.
Ah, so it's not just for looking good or being strong. It directly impacts hormones and metabolism.
Hugely. Dr. Natalie Crawford emphasizes that muscle is one of the most protective things you can have against insulin resistance, which, as we said, is central to PCOS and many other metabolic problems.
How does muscle help with insulin resistance? What's the mechanism?
It's actually pretty amazing. Think of insulin as the key that unlocks your cells to let glucose triggered in for energy. In insulin resistance, the locks get rusty. The key doesn't work well, so sugar builds up in the blood. But muscle tissue has this kind of special back door. Especially when you actively use your muscles, like during resistance training, they can pull glucose out of the bloodstream without relying as much on insulin. They use different transporters, like GLUT4, that get activated by muscle contraction itself.
Wow, so muscle acts like a glucose sponge, almost bypassing the need for perfectly functioning insulin.
That's a great way to put it. It provides an alternative pathway for glucose disposal. So having more muscle mass and actively using it directly combats the core problem of insulin resistance. It's like a built-in metabolic regulator.
So the physical work Layne Norton talks about for managing calories and appetite, and the resistance training Mike Boyle and Jeff Cavaliere advocate for strength and injury prevention.
Is also what Dr. Natalie Crawford highlights is essential for hormonal balance and metabolic health. It all ties together. That physical effort pays dividends across the board, inside and out. #outro.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like we've really woven together these threads. Longevity, vitality. It's not just one thing, is it? It seems to rest on these three pillars. Moving smartly, managing your mindset and internal story, and really paying attention to your internal metrics.
That's a great summary. If we were to boil down the highest leverage takeaways for you, the listener, from all these experts, first, move wisely. Listen to Mike Boyle and Jeff Cavaliere. Question the dogma. Prioritize smart, often unilateral movements that protect your joints for the long haul, like Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's experience painfully taught her. Orthopedic health matters.
Right. Longevity over just lifting heavy.
Second, master your mind. Use powerful techniques like visualization, the way Myra Chura did to overcome incredible adversity, and embrace Oliver Burkeman's idea of accepting finitude. Decide who you want to be and live that identity today.
Act from that identity now. I like that.
And third, monitor your metrics. Be radically honest with yourself, like Dr. Layne Norton advocates. Track your intake to reveal those invisible habits. And take Dr. Natalie Crawford's advice. View your hormonal health as a key vital sign, connected deeply to your overall metabolism. Get the data. Understand your body.
It really paints a picture of proactive ownership, doesn't it? Which leads to maybe a final thought to leave people with. We started by talking about that potential sharp decline after 50 that Mike Boyle warns about.
Yeah, it can sound pretty grim.
But weaving all this together, the mindset work, the metabolic awareness from Layne Norton and Natalie Crawford, the smart training from Mike Boyle, it feels like the capacity for positive change, for healing is always there. Dr. Patrick Porter even reminds us the brain knows how to heal itself.
That's the hopeful message, isn't it?
And maybe the most profound realization is this. If you are active, if you are paying attention, you really do have a longer leash. Your efforts now compound.
That's it, exactly. The consistency, the awareness, it builds buffer, it builds resilience. It literally buys you more healthy, functional time down the road. That couple of hours a week of smart, focused resistance training that Mike Boyle and Jeff Cavaliere talk about, it's not just exercise.
It's your insurance policy.
It's your non-negotiable metabolic and orthopedic insurance policy, helping ensure those later decades are lived with strength, vitality, and purpose. Not just lived, but lived well.